Welcome to a Metal-O-Mania movie countdown as we break down the Crypt's top 10 horror anthology movies. In the world of horror movies, the short story or the anthology are kind of the one-night stand for many scary moviegoers. They are usually quick and deadly, and when done right by the masters, they are short in length but long in reach. This is a list of those with such reach. A solid anthology movie is tough to pull off. There are a bunch that are adequate but are heavily brought down by that one story that makes no sense or has the ridiculous ending. There are even installments and solid series that are terrifying, but in all the wrong ways. VHS Viral and Creepshow 3 are outright abominations and otherwise commendable franchises. But we as horror fans still flock to them when they're made, and I believe we always will. Note for our list, minimal spoilers ahead. I want you to watch these fucking flicks. Well, let's get with the countdown. Number 10 on our list is 1975's Trilogy of Terror. Amelia has become a code word for me when talking about horror anthology movies. For me and many others in my age group, this one was one of the first horror anthology flicks to ever pop our cherry. And because of this movie, Amelia will be our code word going forward for the best story in each movie, because no matter how good the first stories are in this one, whenever you bring it up to someone who has seen it, their first image is of that Zuni fetish doll in the third and final tale. So Amelia it is for the highlight story of these movies. People forget that this was a made-for-TV movie in 1975 and was re-aired annually for Halloween all of our fucking youths. This one makes no pretense with a wraparound tale or some type of glue. It is just 3 stories, all written by Richard Matheson and all starring Karen Black, who actually covers 4 roles throughout. In the first one, entitled Julie, she plays an English college professor who must deal with a college crush from one of her students who is willing to go pretty far to gain her affections. In the second story, Black takes on 2 roles in Millicent and Therese, who are twin sisters with extremely adversarial plans for one another, with one trying to convince the family doctor that the other is evil. Is she right or is she mad? And tale 3 is Amelia, with that little doll serving as an iconic horror image of the age. Black is again the title character and has returned to her high-rise apartment building after shopping and has brought an African Zuni fetish doll said to contain the actual spirit of a Zuni hunter named He Who Kills. Already a bad sign, no? In a time before there was a Chucky, this was some serious doll-on-hottie horror action, gang, and while it is a tad bit dated now, it is still movie gold and must-watch material for any serious fans of the genre. This is my second favorite Karen Black movie behind Easy Rider, the film that made her a star, and for good reason. Number 9, Dos Equis, or Double X, 2017. This one has every single story in it directed by a woman, and in some ways it tackles the genre in much the fashion that Tales from the Hood did for the issues that plague the black community. In particular, it plays on the fears of parents in raising and protecting children. The wraparound here is a walking dollhouse with a face that roams around gathering things and has a real creepy-ass quality to it, but pay attention as it does seem to tell its own demented little tale. In the first piece, called The Box, based on a short story by Jack Ketchum, a mother and her son, Danny, and daughter Jenny, are riding the subway during the Christmas season when Danny asks another patron on the train if he can look at the present inside of his box. Not much is made of the incident and they head home, but Danny is no longer hungry. Ever. We see as he stretches on for days on end, not eating, and the frustration his parents have in understanding what is going on. After telling his sister a secret, Jenny stops eating too. How far would a desperate mother go to make her kids eat? What do you do when helping your children is outside of your reach? Next story is called The Birthday Party and stars Melanie Lansky, who I absolutely fucking adore. She is the best part of the Castle Rock series, and you may all know her best from 2.5 Men as Charlie's neighbor. She plays Mary, a mother who is all set to have a birthday party for her daughter today, but she finds her husband's dead body in his office and decides to go on with the party for little Lucy instead of calling 911, and from there things spiral. For the record, I would have given her the panda suit just for the 2 ounces of medical weed she offers. This one ends with an extended title beyond just the birthday party, which closes this one out with a bit of a sardonic grin. Next up is Don't Fall, which sees 4 friends, 2 males and 2 females, out on a camping trip in the desert. When they find ancient cave drawings and start hearing things in the night, things go from bad to worse rapidly. This one is short and to the point, and maybe this film's Amelia. Then her only living son comes next, and is the final story other than the closing piece of the dollhouse with a face. In this tale, we open to a woman paying off a doctor and promising to stay hidden for it. Spooky and mysterious, right? We cut to the same woman, Cora, waking from a nightmare, and she starts her day with her son, Andy. We find out right away that Andy is rebellious and also happens to be about to turn 18 years old. We also learn very quickly, however, that Andy is no normal teen, as he gets in trouble at school for pulling a valedictorian student's fucking fingernails off, which is pretty brutal. But the school's answer to this transgression is to suspend the victim of Andy's violence instead of him. Indeed, even the mailman, who we first think is flirting with Cora, appears to have a vested interest in protecting Andy. Can a mother's love win out over destiny itself? This story, and indeed entire movie, is filled with more symbology than a Dan Brown novel, while hitting all of the major nightmares of motherhood along the way. Protecting your children from the world, the sometimes ugly truths in it, and often even themselves. Raising a child with the wrong father, or even an outright evil one. Or, what if that evil is you? A great addition to the horror anthology world. Number 8. Southbound, 2016.
Regret and remorse, amends and atonement. That's life, right?
These words play on the radio in the opening minutes of the flick, and regret and remorse play a role in each one of these stories, as Southbound is a surprisingly dark and effective addition to the anthology world. While Southbound doesn't use a wraparound mechanism to weave its tales, it does have a pretty wild way of interlacing them with one another. The film opens with the story Way Out, which introduces two blood-covered dudes trying to leave something they have done behind them, and are having some serious trouble in doing so. Their plight leads directly to story 2, which is Sirens, where three young female rockers, whose band is deliciously entitled The White Tights, is leaving a hotel room and are on a road trip to a gig. The girls have recently lost a friend to death, and the undercurrent of regret and blame build in a story that gets more and more bizarre as their van breaks down and they are helped out by some strangers, one of whom is the never disappointing Dana Gould. And speaking of Dana Gould, Stand Against Evil was the most underappreciated show that none of you fuckers watched. Like, ever. And that is a shame. It was goddamn good. Anyway, this one goes directly into the story The Accident. A driver is texting on his phone and just plows down a pedestrian. He calls 911 for help, but doesn't know where he is, and thus begins an unfolding series of events that quickly go from bad to worse. Is this EMT trying to help him or not? This one blends oddly into our next story called Jailbreak, where a desperately armed man holds up a bar trying to find his long-lost sister. He has come a long way to find her and says he is willing to go to hell to get her, and he may just have to. In the final installment, called The Way In, a family who is spending a last trip together before their daughter goes off to college are the victims of a home invasion in their vacation house. But there is more to this story, and the father seems to recognize these invaders. Just what is behind all of this? When you find out, you will also learn why Southbound is a must-watch movie for even the most casual of horror fans. Number 7. Tales from the Hood, 1995. George Arthur Rusty Cundiff directs this Spike Lee joint and creates a rock-solid, urbanized horror anthology flick that centers on themes that have plagued the black community, such as domestic abuse, gang violence, drugs, police brutality, and the outright ugliness that prevails any time that we as a people judge one another on anything other than the content of our character. The wraparound story has three drug dealers showing up at a funeral home to buy some drugs from the owner, Mr. Sims, played by the amazing Clarence Williams III, a fucking legend. As Mr. Sims talks to the gangsters about their drug deal, he engages in telling the tales behind some of the bodies in his care. Starting with that of Clarence, a body of a black police officer who turned a blind eye to police brutality while on the force, and the price he must pay for turning on not only his own people, but also the innocent in favor of the blue wall. The second body is the charred remains of Carl, a familiar face in one David Alan Grier, and a huge departure from the comedic roles many of us know and love him from. Carl is fucking mean and nothing short of scary as a stepfather who is a real-life monster in his stepson Walter's life. But Walter may have a way of dealing with monsters. A way that leads to one of the more satisfyingly cool death scenes in our entire list. And that is just the second story, which means
this shit ain't over yet, bitch.
The third body is not a body at all, but rather a doll. A doll that is a way station for lost souls. A place where a soul can survive until it can move on. And this doll was found in a house in the South, better known as a plantation. This plantation is run by Duke Metker, who is running for governor, a clear parodied version of David Duke, played by the always fantastic Corbin Burnson. The plantation was once the site of a murderous rampage by a slave owner who chose to slaughter his slaves rather than see them go free. Since then, legend has it that an old old survivor somehow restored the souls of those murdered into the bodies of her little dolls. Those little dolls may want the plantation back, and to be fair, the amazing actor Art Evans cameos several times to warn Duke of what fate may await him if he doesn't vacate the premises. But we all knew he wouldn't listen, and thank the horror gods that he doesn't, because watching Burnson yell racist one-liners as he fights the doll onslaught is as bizarre and uncomfortable as it is entertaining. And maybe it's the dolls, but somehow manages to tackle some pretty heady material with an almost Tales from the Crypt flavor, and it totally fucking works. This is probably the highlight story, or the Amelia of the flick even. Then there is body number 4, a gangster who got involved with that shit. Crazy K, played with powerful effectiveness by Lamont Bentley, is a gangster who murders a rival before being shot down himself, but survives when the police arrive and gun down his would-be assassins. Later, when given a life sentence, Crazy K, or Jerome, is offered a chance to participate in a study that would grant him an early release if he agrees. And so he does. This story has no shortage on social commentary and aims a blindingly bright light on black crime and systemic violence, and the redemption that might be found in breaking the chain, or the futility in the choices that have already been made for you. All of this backs into Mr. Sim's tale of terror and a rewarding wrap-up of our tales from the hood. Number 6, VHS 2, 2012. Part 2 of the VHS series opens up with a private investigator and his girlfriend who are filming a dude cheating on his wife, and then they blackmail the husband instead of telling the wife about it. So we are told right from the start that these cats are a bit unscrupulous. They pick up a job from a woman on the phone to look for her missing son Kyle, which leads the couple to an old empty house with computers, and yep, you guessed it, a pile of videotapes, including several from the first film. Using the same mechanism as the first film, VHS 2 tells its 5 stories as Aisha watches the tapes. In the first clip, we are seeing the tale unfold from the perspective of a formerly blind patient who has received an eye transplant. And for this tale, we are Herman. Herman leaves the doctor's office, but is given a long and quizzical look from a young lady in the waiting room on his way out. Back at home, things go bad pretty quickly as we see images of bodies and people who are not there beginning to appear in front of Herman's eyes. The next day, the girl from the doctor's office shows up at his door and seems to know what he is going through. She introduces herself as Clarissa and comes in explaining that she used to be deaf, and after an implant, she now hears dead people. And exactly right, Herman sees them. So we just need someone else to speak no evil and we're all set, right? As the two talk, they are both seeing and hearing dead people everywhere, so Clarissa decides that they can fight those images off by doing the dirty. And that works for a while, but later, our man Herman wakes up post-coitus, and things go downhill fast in a gruesome little story for the you gore lovers out there. Back to Aisha and Larry, who don't believe that the tapes are real, but Aisha plays a tape for them both of a man saying that if you watch the tapes in the right order, they will affect you. So another tape slides into a VCR, and what starts here is my personal favorite take on a zombie story outside of a Train to Busan. A trail bike rider with a GoPro on his helmet is filming himself POV hitting the trails when a bloody woman comes out of the woods crying and begging for help. She soon begins to violently vomit, which we learn is the biology of someone about to turn into one of the Walking Dead. Our hero, or us in this story, is then bitten, and we get to see his point of view for the whole bloody affair, and it is movie making gold. After our zombie fest, we see Aisha in a trance-like state in front of the videos with a bloody nose. Larry asks if they should leave, but Aisha tells him to go away and sticks in another videotape. For my money, this may be the creepiest short story on our entire list. A 4-person news team investigates an Indonesian cult to try to learn about their mysterious ways. Once inside, we see a fairly normal, if not a bit Heaven's Gate-ish, classroom full of kids. They are welcomed in, songs are being sung, and they are led into the cult's building to interview its leader. In the middle of this interview, church bells begin to ring, and the cult leader grabs his mic to announce over the intercom that it is a time of reckoning. And from there, all hell literally breaks loose. Like, is that fucking Baphomet I just saw? This one is directed by Eduardo Sanchez, who did the second Blair Witch movie, which everyone hated but me, and a shit ton of Supernatural episodes, which Scully and I love, by the way. Go Sam and Dean! Back at the house, Aisha has passed out when Larry finds her on the floor, and instead of getting her help, he sees a tape that says watch on it and sticks it into the machine. It flickers on, and we see the use of GoPros from a bunch of teenage kids and even the dog, who is cameraed up and provides some of the best camera work we see in this story. The parents leave for the weekend, and a game of the younger kids and their friends versus the older sister and her friends, and a series of pranks begins. Some a bit mean-spirited, to be honest, but everyone with siblings knows they are cock-blocking machines. All of this back and forth is cut short, however, as aliens make an appearance. Very cool delivery of a very cool story. Then it's back to Larry and Aisha one more time, where we find out the video's full effect on Aisha. Maybe I just have this lower than the first one because it was the first one, but this is a killer horror anthology for fans of the genre. Number 5 is Creepshow 2, 1987. This second installment of this Stephen King-helmed vehicle builds on the comic book setting and wraparound used in the first one, and adds the comic book delivery guy who is an early ghoul-type character in the vein of a crypt keeper known as the Creep. Cool side note, that is horror icon Tom Savini under that disguise. While relying on animated wraparound sequences of the pages turning in the Creepshow comic we are reading, or watching, we are first taken to an old country store titled and guarded by Old Chief Woodenhead, in an Indian reservation area where an elderly couple is holding on to a dying business because the shopkeeper, played by the late great George Kennedy, is such a nice guy that he keeps giving the goods to locals on loan. When the store is later robbed by a colorful group of characters, to put it mildly, Old Chief ain't happy about it. My only question about this tale is if Old Chief really wanted to have the couples back, maybe a sooner awakening could have been useful. I mean, fuck, vengeance is nice, but survival beats it 8 days a week. The second of only 3 stories in this one is The Raft, and it is this movie's Amelia. 4 college students go for a swim in a remote cold-ass lake to the raft at the center of it to smoke some weed and touch some boobies. In other words, murder offenses in horror movies. So, when they reach the raft, they notice a big black oil slick looking thing in the water, and it seems to be interested in the swimmers. Is it nothing? Or, since we are talking about a fucking horror movie, is it something fucked up? I freely admit that I may be more perverse than most people, but the weirdest, most uncomfortable Copperfield moment of all time is smack dab in the middle of the raft. Enjoy. After some more animation involving some bullying, we get to tale number 3, The Hitchhiker. This story had my 15-year-old self wondering if I could one day sell some dick for a living, because the main character is a hot Lois Childs who is paying a male prostitute who apparently could be making even more money if he charged by the orgasm. My career plans have derailed some. Anyway, on the way home from her man whore, she is running late and doesn't want to have to explain things to her husband. Hurriedly and distractedly, she heads for home and accidentally kills a hitchhiker. And this story coined a phrase that me and several of my buddies still use on occasion to this day. Thanks for the ride, lady. Although, we usually reserved it for bedroom conquests in the immature but timeless tradition of male stupidity. The film closes with the end of the animation involving the creep and the kid. Next up is Tales from the Dark Side, the movie, 1990. Okay, so maybe it didn't hurt that I was a 19-year-old kid when I went to see this one in the movie theater, but I loved this movie then, and I still love it now. And consider its star power: Christian Slater, Steve Buscemi, Julianne Moore, Robert Klein, Ray Dawn Chong, a criminally underappreciated James Remar, who you may be more familiar with as Dexter's dearly departed dead father Harry, as well as a super young Matthew Lawrence and the amazing Debbie Harry as the witch who wants to eat him in a superbly blended wraparound story. Debbie Harry is prepping her kitchen to cook a young Lawrence when the boy decides to try to buy himself some time by telling her 3 scary tales. And those tales include a murderous mummy who maims and mummifies in an adaptation of Arthur Conan Doyle's short story Lot Number 249. Then comes George A. Romero's take on Stephen King's short story The Cat from Hell, which features a rich tycoon who has made his pharmaceutical empire on testing his products on animals, notably killing more than 5,000 cats in the process, who hires an assassin to protect him from the black cat he believes that has come for revenge. This one will change the way you think about eating pussy, and this story is highlighted by the always creepy William Hickey, who, when he passed away in 1997, had almost 100 acting credits to his name. Rest in peace, brother. And the third tale is one of love, the ability to keep a promise, and gargoyles. My favorite story in the bunch, easily the Amelia. It is a fantastic climax that delivers a real gut punch finish to the tales before we come back to Debbie Harry and her talking dinner. And while the ending might be a tad predictable there, it is fucking Debbie Harry, damn it. So who cares?
This is your story, and you can stop telling it now because we both know how it comes out.
Great flick and a superb representative of the television series. And
don't you just love happy endings?
Number 3, Trick or Treat, 2007. This is one of the most fun movies on our list and has a cool way of blending its stories and timeline together that overlap each other in spades, to cool storytelling effect. The premise of this movie is that there are rules to Halloween that must be observed, and it appears that our little pumpkin-headed friend named Sam is here to observe and enforce those rules. The opening scene sees a couple coming home from Halloween celebrations and fatefully deciding to take down the decorations that night, when the Halloween rules are to leave them up until the next day. See where we are going with this? By the way, don't you just love Leslie Bibb? There is the kid who gets caught smashing jack-o'-lanterns by his high school principal, played by the great Dylan Baker, who I love in everything I have ever seen him in. There's the group of kids who play a mean prank on the Halloween fanatic Rhonda, said to be a savant. The hot babes and sexy damsels in distress costumes make their way to a Halloween surprise party that has more surprises in store than just bobbing for apples. And that's all before talking about the nasty tricks that can come from not giving out treats. This one should be a yearly staple for the Halloween season in our opinion, and little Sam is a badass. There has been talk of a sequel for years, and here's hoping that happens and that they don't fuck it up, cause I want more Sam. Number 2 is VHS 2012. I don't mind a good found film flick myself if it's done right. The problem is, it usually isn't. But when it works, I think it is a fantastic vehicle for horror. A real front seat to the terror, if you will. And the first 2 VHS movies totally make it work. Forget the third one that probably killed this franchise, but these first 2 really are clever and horrific. This, the first in the series, centers on a group of miscreants who ply their trade in pirate videos, showing us an early clip of the group filming themselves and apparently getting $50 each time for grabbing girls on the street and lifting up their shirts and exposing their boobies. One of them tells the group that they have an offer to make a bunch of money by breaking into some old guy's house to steal a videotape. Tape number 56 to be exact. When they arrive at the house, they find the old man dead in a room full of TVs, VCRs, and videotapes. And this becomes the wraparound as we see the tales told to us by one of the guys going through playing videotape after videotape. The first tape starts with some guys in a motel room preparing to go out to a party and gearing up with some camera glasses on the nerdy one so that we can see the story from his perspective. He is the awkward cat in this party, and as they hit the clubs and bars, his buddies are talking to girls and making moves, while our guy, who is our ride for this thing, is lame and shy. But throughout the night, a strangely odd and sexy girl seems to be trying to get his attention. The party finally moves back to a hotel room, and our boy has performance issues, seemingly because he feels guilty about wearing a camera without the girl's knowledge. And from there, things turn uncomfortable, then bizarre, and then downright horrific with a wet, meaty slap. Hannah Fearman is haunting in her role as Lily and reprises that role in the later spin-off flick from this short called Siren, all of which was written by David Bruckner and company, who were behind 2017's horror gem The Ritual, and also Southbound. Hearing his name attached to the new Hellraiser project has even given me hope that they can revive that franchise. He also is behind the better Creepshow episodes from last year and what is sure to be a top 10 horror anthology TV series when we do that fucking video. But that is a different list for a different day, so back to VHS. In between videos, we see some creepy shadows and movements going on in the background, and more shots showing these guys are some shitbags, including one of them attempting to tape a girl having sex without her knowledge. So then the next tape starts, and it is a young couple on a road trip in Arizona for their second honeymoon. After spending the day in a Wild West-themed town, Sam and Stephanie are back in their hotel room where Sam tries to film some sex time stuff. And for the second time in this fucking movie already, we are denied implied impending POV porn.
Nothing for you!
But VHS does pay off with some nudity, as most good horror movies do. So then some creepy shit starts to happen to the two, including one dark scene where they are sleeping and someone is filming themselves caressing Stephanie's ass with a knife blade and stealing Sam's money. What does this stranger want, and how did they get into the room so easily? Did you erase the tape? No? Then watch it to find out, damn it. In the next tape, a group of teenagers are filming themselves going out into the woods while one of them tells the story of a murder that once happened here. The camera seemed to be picking up some sort of static and intermittent shots of bodies. There's a glitch in the cameras, and it's got a knife.
Joey, you're all gonna fucking die up here.
What? In the next tape, there is a couple communicating by way of some type of internet access, and the outlandishly cute Helen Rogers plays Emily, who believes her apartment is haunted while obsessively scratching at a bump in her arm that she says reminds her of an accident she had when she was younger. Emily's behavior becomes increasingly erratic as she centers more and more on her arm and the beings she believes are surrounding her. And this one hits you right in the crotch when you see what's going on. And on. And on. Then, back at the house, is that fucking dead guy in the chair up and moving? On the next tape, the date shows that it is Halloween in 1998. Four pals go to a Halloween party with a nanny cam built into the teddy bear costume one of them is wearing. But they end up at the wrong house where the boys stumble on an exorcism of a woman that they believe is part of the Halloween fun. But this is one hell of a haunted house right here. The credits roll to a few extra shots of the douchebag boys in action. Overall, this is a stellar horror anthology for you to spend an evening with. Okay, and before we get to our number one horror anthology movie of all time, according to the Crypt, let's run down a few of our also-rans, or just didn't make the cut, but could have, because they're damn good flicks. Dead of Night, 1945. While not necessarily the first ever horror anthology movie, this one is the first to use its wraparound style that glues the whole thing together and is still fantastic to this day. Dr. Terror's House of Horrors, 1965. While riding a train through the British countryside, Dr. Shrek, played by the legend himself, Christopher Lee, is a mysterious fortune teller who reads the tarot cards of 5 fellow passengers, each making up one of the stories. Cat's Eye, 1985. Another fantastic Stephen King collection, with James Wood's Quitters Inc. story being the Amelia in this one, and look out for a super young Drew Barrymore. Tales of Terror, 1962. Richard Matheson wrote the screenplay, but this one is 3 Edgar Allan Poe stories and has horror icon Vincent Price in each one of them. John Carpenter's Body Bags, 1993. As goofy and humorous as it is bloody. Look for the many Easter eggs and references to other horror movies, like the gas station being in Haddonfield, Illinois. Tales from the Crypt, 1972. Before the Crypt Keeper would make his appearance in the HBO show, this British movie was made in homage to the horror comics and is truly great. There is even a Joan Collins role in this damn thing. Ghost Stories, 2017. Speaking of stellar British films, this one grows on me more and more, and if we made this list next year, it may even crack into the top 10 by then. For the record, I love Martin Freeman and everything. Asylum, 1972. Another Amicus release. Amicus was a British movie company that really got behind making horror anthologies in the 60s and 70s. They also made Dr. Terror's House of Horrors, Torture Garden, Tales from the Crypt, The House That Dripped Blood, The Vault of Horror, and From Beyond the Grave. But this one has a cool framing story in it, that a doctor arrives for a job interview at an asylum and is told that he must interview the patients for their stories, and identify which is the doctor that just recently underwent a mental breakdown. If he guesses correctly, he gets the job. The Field Guide to Evil, 2018. A cool concept and presentation. This movie brings 8 filmmakers from 8 different countries together to tell 8 different horror stories that are based on folk tales from their homelands. Ranging from the twisted to the bizarre, it is an ambitious project that mostly fires on all cylinders. And also, After Midnight, 1989. This movie taught my teenage self what Deus Ex Machina meant, and it may teach you that as well if you don't already know. Also, a young Pamela Adlon, who is credited as Pamela Seagal, is in this, and I have always loved her. She is great in all the Louis C.K. shit she's been in as well. Alright, let's move on to number 1. And our number 1 horror anthology movie of all time is Creepshow, number 1, 1982. Written by Stephen King and directed by George Romero. I mean, that is horror royalty right there, folks. It has inspired 2 sequels, far too few in my opinion, likely because the third one sucks 7 pounds of walrus dick. It also inspired an assumed sequel in the Tales from the Dark Side movie, and even a recent run of short stories on Shudder TV that were pretty damn good. There is no part of this movie that is not iconic. From Tom Atkins' role as the dickhead comic-hating father that opens up the movie all the way to its satisfying conclusion. Creepshow had star power too, as Hal Holbrook, Ted Danson, Ed Harris, early Scream Queen Adrienne Barbeau are all in it, as well as Leslie Nielsen in a role that was as far from Naked Gun as you will ever see him in. Cool side note, the little boy who plays Billy is 9-year-old Joe King, whose pen name is Joe Hill and is also an author, and happens to be Stephen King's son, having written The Tall Grass with his dad, among some other very cool projects that he has penned. Our first segment in Creepshow is Father's Day, which tells of Bedelia, who took care of her rich father who berated her, controlled her, and is even behind her losing the love of her life. Until she snaps. Did she kill him? Will she make him a cake for Father's Day? That bitch!
You bitch! You called me a bitch!
Many have said of the second story, The Lonesome Death of Geordie Verrill, that perhaps Stephen King shouldn't have acted in it, but I say his performance of that idiot Geordie Verrill is fucking fantastic.
Meteor ship!
He finds a meteor on his land and things don't go so great for that fucking lunkhead Geordie. Then, in Something to Tide You Over, Leslie Nielsen is a rich and powerful cat who has learned that Harry, played by Ted Danson, has been slipping the centerpiece to his old lady. He has devised a vicious plan for revenge, unless you can hold your breath for a long, long time.
I can hold my breath for a long time!
Then comes The Crate and the amazing Adrienne Barbeau in a role as a shrill, drunken, loudmouthed wife to a college professor played by Hal Holbrook. When a janitor at the college finds an old crate marked June 19, 1834 Arctic Expedition in a forgotten part of the basement, its contents could change everything. Especially for Henry and whoever that etiquette crotch bitch is. Next up, in They're Creeping Up on You, we meet Upson Pratt, a ruthless and rich businessman who has a hatred for bugs that almost matches his hatred of people and treats both of them about the same. He has himself all sealed up in a penthouse apartment where he must defend himself from the accusations of people his business dealings have ruined, and somehow, despite a spotless environment, roaches. Someone must pay for this. We then close this whole thing out with Billy and his comic books and some motherfucking voodoo. And it don't get much better than that. And that, my friends, is our list. The best of horror anthology flicks. What did we leave off, and what did we give too much love to? We want to hear from you, so tell us what you think about our wrap-up, because this has been a scary-ass horror anthology countdown with yours truly, The Crypt, for Metal-O-Mania.